Okay, guys, just making sure YouTube's actually picking up the stream. I think it is. Come on, YouTubes. I'm watching my YouTube studio here. Okay, we're good. Hey, I think this is one of the most pressing questions or one of the most asked questions in all of humankind. What comes next? And it's fascinating to have conversations about it. I love hearing what you guys think, whether I mean, it makes no difference to me if it's in line with what I think or if it's the polar opposite. I just like getting other people's impressions. And I don't know, I think in some ways too, it's kind of cathartic. It's a cathartic topic to discuss. No, maybe? But we got gang coming in already. Chrome's here, Callum's here, Zuchen's here, Steve is in. Now, I'm also going to, and I'm sorry, Aaron Lee is in. I'm going to be reading some of the comments that came in. Now, we did a video of this same title that was the precursor to the stream itself. And we had a lot of interesting comments come in over there too. And I want to talk about some of them, but one in specific. One, I want to see if you guys agree with me. One of them annoyed me. And not because of the person's beliefs, their belief structure. It was more of the way they structured what they had to say and what I think was the impetus behind it. So I want to see what you guys think of that. But before I get to it, for any who didn't see that video, I'm just one of these people that believes when we die, it's just over. There's just nothing. I believe it's the same as things were before I was born. No consciousness, no nothing. Whatever goes on is just perceived by other people's consciousness, but for me, it's just over. And as I said in the video too, I know for a lot of people that's kind of a depressing thought or a sad thought. It isn't for me. Again, as I've said before, I just think it's cool that we beat the astronomical, just unfathomable odds to exist here on this planet in this time and doing whatever it is that we're doing here. So I just like, hey, I'm grateful for whatever this consciousness is. I'm glad I got it. I want to have fun with it. And when it's time for it to be over, it'll suck because it's been a good ride, but it's okay. It's all right. I'll be ready to go. Chrome says, I don't know, awareness seems to be something special, so it feels a bit hard to believe that there's not something. I understand what you're saying, and I do think awareness is something special, but I think it's just something we rent. Again, for me, it's just when it's over, it's back to whatever it was before you existed. And I know I don't remember anything before I existed. I think some people believe that they do, but let me before to get you guys started. Let me read some of the comments. I wanted you guys to see what you think because there's one that kind of annoyed me, and it could be me just being a dick. See what you guys think. And again, when you guys comment here on the videos, you're welcome to say anything you want. As long as nobody's being an asshole to others or just stating, not in this case where it's all opinion, but stating something that's patently untrue or something like that, you're welcome to say whatever you want. And I enjoy reading it. Hey, Curtis, you inspired me to make videos. Thank you for bringing up the subject. To this day, as a Catholic, Neil Fulcrum says, I'm still afraid to die. But I believe there is another life beyond this. With all the hardships we go through in life has to mean something in the next. I don't believe in the next, as I said, but I think I would think that last part would be true. If there is a next step, if there is a great creator, and that great creator is in charge of what comes next, yeah, I would think the things that you experienced here should have some accounting for where you end up there, right? If it is a great creator who put all this in place, I would think. Aaron, thanks for the super chat. Says, I don't know what happens after death, but I hope Emanuel Swedenborg concept of the afterlife is the one I hope for. I'm not familiar. We're going to have to look that up because I don't want you to have to post it. Emmanuel Swedenborg concept. Let me see. Let me pause off the comments for just a second because now that's got me curious. Emmanuel Swedenborg concept. Maybe I can get a capsulization of it. Yeah, if I can spell, it'll help. Emmanuel. See, this is why I love doing these things. This is something brand new to me. Okay. The AI overview says Emmanuel Swedenborg's concept centers on the idea of a loving, all-encompassing God who created the universe and everything within it with a specific purpose, to enable humans to develop their capacity for love and live in heaven. That's about as cool as it could get right there. If that's the case, that's badass. His theology emphasizes correspondences, the belief that all creation reflects the spiritual realities of God's love and wisdom. Swedenborg also proposed a spiritual world where souls are guided by their inner nature and gravitate toward communities of like-minded spirits. That's really interesting. Yeah, having read that, Aaron, I'm 100% with you. That's, if there's an afterlife, what Swedenborg has outlined there would be the ultimate. 100%. I completely believe that. Let me, and I will. I promise I'll get to all your comments. I just I wanted to read this one off to you and see what you think. I'll skip through and I'll go to the one that kind of irritated me a little. And you guys feel free to tell me if it's just me being an asshole or what. Now I will. Oh, if I can find it. Oh, he didn't delete it, did he? I didn't. Uh-oh. Oh, no. I have no idea what happens after death, but I do have my hopes. Really? Oh, no, here it is. I found it. Okay. This is from Saw YTV 6170. Now, I'll preface this by saying, oh, and this is Aaron again. Thank you again for the super chat. You can also choose hell. It's a personal choice. And again, if that's the belief structure, if I were to accept that belief structure, yeah, I would think so. I would think if there is a grand designer, that the grand designer would have definite input into where you end up at the next step. So yeah, I would, if that were my belief system, I would think that would be the case. Yes. If that creator is powerful enough to have created all of this, that creator is also certainly powerful enough to be in charge of what comes next, obviously. So yes. But I'll read this and then I promise I'll get right to your comments. Now you guys tell me if you agree or not. And again, I was going to preface it by saying I've read, over the years we've had this channel, we have the Goosh and all the different things I do online. Tens, probably hundreds of thousands of comments, because I'm voracious in reading the comments. Because of that, you start to get a really, what I think is a really good feel for people's personalities based on extended comments. Am I always right? I have no way of knowing, but I think I get a good handle on it. But this one struck me a little bit. Now, Saul says, actually, you can be certain about this topic. I disagree there, but okay. Nothing wrong with disagreeing. I like you, Curtis, and I would like to have a discussion with you on this if you are willing. And I think you should care enough to discuss it and reach a conclusion before your inevitable death. I hope you live a long, healthy, and happy life. Part one, first half, no issues with too much of all of that. I think a lot of times people that have a certain belief get a little narcissistic about that belief. When you say, I think you should care enough to discuss it, rather than saying, you know, I'd like to, if you're free, I'd like to have a discussion with you, or I'd like to see what you think on this. When you phrase it that way, you should care enough to discuss it. It's like you're trying to position somebody to where if they don't want to listen to you, well, then do so at your own peril, because I know a lot. That's how it strikes me, but that's neither here nor there. Second half's where it got me. P.S. To anyone claiming or saying, quote, I think nothing happens after death, end quote. I hope you understand that both linguistically and scientifically, the term nothing is defined as the absence of everything. There's no big shock there. I think we're fairly comfortable with, with what the definition of nothing was. Now, in parentheses, no time, no space, no perception, no thought. Yeah. So how can anyone describe or affirm the experience of nothing if experience itself wouldn't exist? That question in parentheses is absolutely ridiculous. You just defined it. The absence of everything. Nobody that I've seen, certainly in our chat here or anything, is trying to affirm an experience of nothing, because you can't. It's nothingness. What people are saying is, people like me, I believe that my consciousness goes away. Whatever this consciousness is that we're experiencing, when I die, it's gone. That becomes nothingness by definition. I'm not experiencing the nothingness. I'm observing the fact that it's an eventuality, which is scientifically, philosophically, and logically absurd. Even in theory, it absolutely is not. It's only a concept. Nothing doesn't actually exist. Now, here's where that irritates me. All you're trying to do there, this is obviously somebody with a specific belief and a certain faith. What the attempt is here is to play some games of linguistics to try and say that what someone else might believe can't be true, even though everything they said here was entirely logically flawed. But nothing can't be a real choice. That means you have to believe that something happens, which brings you over, allows me to enter in then and explain to you what the reality actually is. It's a game of semantics. What this person said, to me, that's a cocky way of approaching things. It's an obnoxious way of approaching things. And that's why it irritated me a little. The whole thing he or she explained about nothingness is, and I hope this person is in. If you're in the chat, please let me know. If you're in the chat and you want to explain further and go around with me on this, I would love to, I'll put you on Discord right now. We can do it right here. Of course, nothing is the absence of everything. To say that nothing can exist is asinine. You're saying something can't exist because you can't observe it. The very nature of nothingness is that you can't observe it. We're all aware of that. So the fact that you're trying, again, to play semantics with a word when you know full well what is actually meant when someone says, I go to nothingness, it means you cease to exist. This consciousness ceases to exist. This consciousness is all we know. If none of it exists for us anymore, it becomes nothingness. We're not observing it. We're discussing the fact that it will exist and it will be nothingness by definition, your own definition, exactly that. And I don't like the gymnastics that are played in situations like this, especially people who feel like they have something they need to accomplish, which is to bring people over into their way of thinking, is to save people, is by saying, okay, nothingness is not a possibility. So now you have to listen to what I have to say, because I'm at least giving you options that are possible. Somebody writes something like this, to me, you're either a moron or just obnoxious, or both. And that's the one. Now, you guys tell me, maybe I'm being too harsh about that, but that's definitely how I feel about things like that. Comments like that irritate me for that reason, because it's just a little bit of linguistic gymnastics to try and position someone in the position you want them. Chrome says, Curtis, I like you and I want you, so we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I think you should care enough to try all variants of American cheese before you say you don't like it. There you go. You're talking about the exact same type of thing. It's all in a positioning, a linguistic positioning, and I don't care for it. Nothing is something. In some degrees, yeah, it is, Doc. It is nothing. And the thing is, this poster said as much. He defined it. So if something has a definition, if a word has a definition, doesn't it thereby have to be something? it's defined, and he defined it correctly, and then went on to basically disrespect or dismiss his own definition. He says, this is what that means. Now that's not possible. And of course it is. Big Green says, a little harsh, maybe. I've heard way worse religious nuts. Oh, me too. At least he was willing to discuss this further with you instead of just saying, nah, you're wrong. I don't know. For me, Big Green, I prefer the nah, you're wrong. Say, nah, you're wrong. Don't try and position yourself into a more powerful point of view by spouting stuff that is just absolute nonsensical garbage. If you got enough passion that you're like, no, you're wrong, and I need to save you. You're not gonna save me, but I would have more respect for that. Morgan says, I don't think anyone can say with certainty what happens after we die. No, I know I can't. For me, I like to think we go through a life review and understand the good and bad we did to take into the next life. Again, as I said, yeah, Morgan, I think if I were to be swayed somehow into a belief that there is something that comes next, that's along the lines of what I would think. That, again, because if there is something else, that means there is some sort of grand creator, right? A great deity. If that deity exists, I would think that deity also holds all the strings as to where you go next and what type of reality you face next. So yes, that I would, if I believed in that, I would agree with you. And now Lex says, I've always thought, assuming reincarnation theory is true, what happens when we run out of lives? The sun is going to blow up one day and life is going to stop. So what happens after the last reincarnation? That's interesting. That's right. That's true. Well, one thing we do know that is a fact is obviously this existence, this planet will not last forever because, as Lex says, it may still be hundreds of millions of years, but the sun is going to fizzle out. It's going to blow up, and this planet will be no more. This life that we know here will be no more. So what she's saying is, if you're reincarnated, do you just keep going until what about when there's no more opportunity? You've obviously gone through a process to be reincarnated. Where do you go once that process is no longer available? Maybe to another? Is this almighty being or almighty essence that's facilitating the reincarnations? Does it also hold sway over other similar situations where you could go there instead? I don't know. Chrome says, I mean, scientists do have good reason to suspect a multiverse exists. So reality could truly be infinite in time and dimension, right? Where that's going to be an upcoming stream in and of itself, the idea of multiverse, because I'm fascinated by that, and I'm not super well versed in it. I'd love to get to hear. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it, because that fascinates me. Beaches says, does that mean each star will blow up so it will end eventually, or am I missing a page in my science book? Now, okay, the people with a better scientific knowledge feel free to correct me. I know that stars of a certain size definitely have an expiration date. They will eventually blow up. I don't know, is it all stars of any size and density? Or is it just you have to be over a certain density? But yeah, I do know that stars burn out and blow up. But like I say, I'd have to hear from other people, because not good. I should have paid attention once in a while in school, but I didn't. Big Green says, I love multiverse theory. Yeah, that'll be a stream in and of itself, Big Green, because I'm fascinated by it. And I don't know much about it. So it's fun to learn from you guys. Aaron says, perhaps everything is mind, and you can choose what happens after death. So I'm just trying to absorb what you're saying there. And so, are you saying, so basically, by mind, I know you don't mean our physical brain. Obviously, we know that decays. you're saying kind of like soul, basically, right? Or your essence, your soul, same thing, continues on. Hmm. Because that's the big question mark. We all know, we all understand the concept of a soul, whether you believe it exists or not. We understand that concept, and there is something about us as humans that is not understandable in that essence. So could that go on even though we're dead? But if it does go on, where does it go? Hmm. I don't know. And Morgan says the reason I believe in the life review is because of the concept of heaven. It's supposed to be wonderful. But if we bring our ignorance into heaven, how can it be so great? Then it's just earth. That's fair. I think that's fair. Um, yeah, and I guess a lot of that would depend too. If there is a heaven, and obviously we want to get in there. And what shape do you take in the afterlife? I mean, are there still the same options available to you that there are here on Earth? In other words, can you be mean to others? Can you demean others if you so chose? And by the same account, can you lift up others and be supportive of them? Or is it just, are we just floating orbs, floating essences, just kind of bobbing around? I don't know. Okay, that's what I thought, Steve, but I didn't want to say for sure. Steve says, to answer Curtis's questions, all stars are destined to burn out, regardless of destiny or anything else. Density or anything else. Okay, thank you, Steve. I thought so, but again, I don't like to say something as fact unless I'm sure. So yes, that answers your question. Yes, all stars are going to eventually die. Ashen Mint says, what if heaven isn't a place, but a state of mind, like eternal heroin high? Well, it would have to be again a state of soul, right? Because like I say, when we say mind, we can't really mean the brain because we can see that. We know that rots away. It becomes dust. So it would have to be something within us, whatever this. See, I don't necessarily believe we have a special essence. I know that's kind of depressing to hear, but I think everything that we see, feel, is just a matter of electric synapses in our systems. I will also say, and I don't want to go too deep into this because it's going to be a separate stream too. The big failing of the Big Bang Theory, or to be fair, the failing of a belief that there is one omnipotent being who created this. On both sides, you can say, well, what came before? What came before the Big Bang? What came before the existence of this omnipotent being? No way to answer that. Science readily admits they can't answer. They don't know. Where did the pieces of space dust that eventually became the Big Bang, where did they come from? What was there before? They don't know. And the only reason I bring this up, and again, I don't want to sidetrack us because it will be a separate stream. That's where I start leaning into different concepts like parallel universes, and even more so, are we actually somebody else's playground? Did somebody else, and by that I don't mean a divine being, I mean a more masterful race. And again, I forgot what do they call? I've got it on my phone because I was making notes for talking to you guys about this stuff because I forget words constantly. You guys know that. The simulation theory. some people lean towards that simulation theory. Are we a simulation? And if not, that one's a real far reach, but it would explain why there was no before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang was created, in essence, even if you don't want to call it the Big Bang, but everything here was created by somebody else, a more obviously much superior group of entities. Right, basically, Big Green. Oh, sorry, I'm playing Sims with all of you. Don't worry, I'll click on quick game. Right, exactly. We are nothing more than somebody's game of Sims. Right. Aaron says, or is the process of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is true? We die and restart over and over forever. Well, yeah. My only question for that is the same, with reincarnation. Who facilitates that, I wonder? It's got to be somebody pulling the strings, right? I mean, at that point, wouldn't those entities be akin to gods? They'd basically be our gods. I've heard that. I've watched a few interviews on that from, people way, way smarter than me. And it's a stretch. But what they're saying is you have a society that built other societies, just like a video game. Okay, but they made NPCs and kept advancing. This society kept advancing to a state where they could give the NPCs free will. And they could basically create their own little video game, for lack of a better term, where all the NPCs had personalities, individual characteristics, and they created their own world. What was said in those videos was interesting to me, that if you believe that there are, and I do, I don't believe in this great expanse of the cosmos that we could be the only situation where there is life, but if there are now and have been in the past other societies created, a lot of people in the scientific field, I found out, believe that most of those societies will not get to ultimate levels of evolution because they'll end up destroying themselves first. And we can see that here. We see what's going on here. I mean, look at now over the years, over the decades, how quickly, really, when you think about it against the idea of all time, how quickly we've come to where we now have the ability to just destroy this planet many times over. We could end everything here at any moment. It could happen. And the scientists pointed out that's probably what prevents communities or different life forms from interacting with each other, because a society would have to advance just like ours has had to advance and continue to advance and become smarter and more creative. And we have. But you finally get to that point where you're smart enough to destroy yourselves. And that's what a lot of scientists believe happens to civilizations. Wukong says, I imagine it's just the rules of nature and the universe that make that kind of process possible. So you're saying, Wukong, there's not like there's no individual big puller of the strings or anything. It's part of whatever all of this is. And by all of this, I mean the cosmos. Whatever happened that created us here, that's just another process in it. I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's so many things, obviously, that we don't understand about our own existence. You can't rule out anything like that. Excuse me. Lex says, as a history and mythology buff, my view on Christianity is that it's a cool book with some interesting stories and characters. But I fucking hate organized Christianity. So much of history and literature is lost thanks to religious zealots calling it blasphemy and having it destroyed. Most of that is due to Christian colonization. No, that's true. It's true. Um, as somebody who, as I said, I am not a believer, and I tell you this wholeheartedly, I have zero issue with people who have a faith. I think for the vast majority of people, that faith is something really valuable for them. I think it's something really good for them. It helps them to get through, again, whatever this existence is. But unfortunately, as Lick's outlined, there's always within that world going to be the ones who are the true zealots who are over the top with their beliefs to the point where if you don't believe the same way, there must be a price to be paid. And that would be in the burning of books, the killing of people. And that's obviously where I depart mightily with the concept of religion. Uh, Morgan says, though I do like to believe in what I mentioned, I acknowledge it's partially to make myself feel better. Sure, I want it to be true, but if not, well, then when I die, it won't matter. That's touching, right, Morgan, on the onto the outskirts of Pascal's wager. Sure, and I believe that. And as I said in the video, Pascal's wager, that's playing. I am a gambler. That's playing the odds. For those who don't know, Pascal's wager is basically just saying that you have a belief, a belief in God or there being a supreme being, a deity, because why not? At least you're covering all your bases that way. Because so many times religion tells you if you don't believe, you're going to a bad place. So Pascal's wager says, I'll put some of my chips on the fact that there is a God out there, because that's the best option, and that's a good wager. If I was gambling, yeah, you got to throw a few bucks on it. You got to protect yourself. So I think that's true with a lot of people. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I would hope that if there is a divine being, he understands that whatever it took to make people believe or pay attention to teachings, or maybe even make somebody be a better person than they would have otherwise, who cares if it was through Pascal's wager? Wukong says, in my opinion, yeah, like I said, even when stars die, something comes out of it like a black hole or a new star altogether, much like how organic, I think that misspelled something on you, dying will go back into nature, letting life grow. Hmm. So just recurring, right? Okay, I get you. Steven says, I think of it like a clockmaker that makes a clock, winds it up, and leaves it to run on its own. When you say you think of it, do you mean like the presence of a supreme being, like of God? Hmm. Yeah, I will say that because a lot of people, especially in my position, when they're an atheist or just don't have a belief, will say, well, if there's a God, why does he allow things like childhood cancer? Why does he let bad things happen to kids? Or why doesn't he stop wildfires that kill a bunch of people or any type of natural disaster? And that I've never put a lot of a lot of faith in something like that, or ask that question as somebody who doesn't believe, because I think even if there is a supreme being, I think he would have created all this and said, there you go, I made this for you, now do what you got to do. And I don't think he was ever designed himself to be there and micromanage every little element of what takes place. And Brother E says, I would say our livelihood is fixated on the idea of a higher being as a way to cope for an answer to the bigger meaning in life. Sure. But rationally, we likely are just specks in the cosmos and die by nature. And the second part, that's where I am. Yeah, and I think so. I think for a lot of people, and it's completely understandable, I think for a lot of people, having that belief that there's something else keeps them sane. There's something else on the other side is what makes life livable. I do honestly believe there are a lot of people that would have trouble going about their day-to-day life if they didn't have that belief that, if they're a good person, there's something really grand waiting for them in eternity. And that's completely understandable. I get that. And as I've said over and over, I hope that's true. Even if I don't get to take part in it because I didn't believe in it, all the people that I love, all the people that are close to me believe in it. So, man, that would be awesome if they're going to get to lead that kind of eternity. And for those of you who believe in it, if it ends up you're right and, you get to go on to that heaven and, it's just wonderful on the other side there. Throw in a good word for me here or there, even if they won't believe you. Chrome says, for eternal recurrences, it's literally a natural process of the universe collapsing, causing infinite big bangs where you live slightly different lives each time. The universe collapses and causes infinite big bangs each time. I don't know, because now the common belief, the scientific principle of the Big Bang is that, of course, the cosmos is ever expanding and continues to expand. If that's the case, so how would you have individual universes just collapsing and starting over? I don't know. B. Green says, for me, it's less the idea of there being a God and more so the idea that we're not alone in the universe. I hope we're not alone, and I'm sure we aren't. Oh, I agree with you. I've always said, Big Green, I think it would be very arrogant of us to believe that in this grand cosmos, we are the one and only situation that evolved to allow life to take place, this consciousness, a consciousness to take place. As we were just saying, if you believe in the Big Bang Theory and that the cosmos is ever expanding, we can't even wrap our brains around the idea of infinity, and it's expanding to infinity. There has to be other cases of similar life. I would think, just playing the odds. Again, I'm somebody who always liked odds and percentages and shit like that. You just playing those odds, there has to be, right? There's got to be more situations like this. Now, very likely, so far away, so far removed from one another, they may never encounter each other. And especially with what we were talking about earlier, if it's true that societies generally will only keep progressing to the point where they become powerful enough to destroy themselves, that makes it complicated as well. That always stuck with me because that tends to track. That makes sense to me because we're living it. Again, now we are in a state where we can destroy all of this easily. We can obliterate this planet at any time we want. And it could happen because we've progressed far enough to do it. And the simple fact is we are so far advanced now technologically that technology keeps expanding technology. Our technology now is smart enough to improve itself. There's no limit to it. It's not going to be that many years to where you're going to have weaponry available that would much more efficiently and effectively destroy this planet than nukes. Big Green says, but there are beings smarter than us out there, or are they strange abominations? Well, that's the thing. We don't know what other situations. Again, I think it would be arrogant to say that there's not other life out there, but we don't know what form that would take. I will go so far as to say, we know, life on this planet exists because we have this perfect circumstance of being in this orbit around our star, that the temperature is just so, everything fell into place. That's what I mean by just beating astronomical odds. Everything fell into line perfectly to support this life that we had. So if you're saying that the cosmos goes on for eternity, there has to be other cases that are extremely similar to this, right? Again, just by the odds. There has to be. Mint Man, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for the super chat. He says, you die, you report to me. My army grows by the day. Bring back original Twinkies. Now we're getting down to what's important. The original I 100%. And I will gladly join your army if you supply the original Twinkies, without a doubt. Look Fun says, if we live in a simulation, then what we do is predetermined by code. To a degree, Look Fun, that's interesting. I like that. To a degree, but are they advanced enough? And this is what we face here, and we're going to have streams about this as well, with the possibility of the AI uprising. Are they advanced enough to write code that allows for free will? If you understand what I'm saying. You could write code that takes away it unties the individuals, those NPCs, for lack of a better term, and just says you can be aware of your surroundings and make your own decisions. It's not predetermined for you. That's the step you would have to take for the simulation theory to be a case. And some scientists believe, and it's from what I read and watched, it's a small percentage, that this is something that would take place over and over. You would have a society that builds its simulation. That simulation grows, becomes super intelligent, and builds its own simulation. And so for us to exist, if that were the case, if we don't get our shit together and don't blow ourselves, and do blow our, if we don't get our shit together and avoid blowing ourselves up, we're going to be the last in the line of those simulations, because we're a long way from creating that yet. I don't know. That one's a far reach. I think the idea of parallel universes is more likely. Chrome says the Big Crunch is actually one of the big theories about how the universe will end. Eventually, expansion reaches a limit, then goes inward until it explodes again, restarting the process eternally. That's interesting. I don't have nearly enough scientific knowledge to understand how that would work to say, oh, that, yes or no. But that's a fascinating idea. Beecher says, what do you think about Elon taking our minds and putting it in a mechanical body to live forever? Well, I mean, in fairness, that's been a concept in sci-fi and something dreamed of by eggheads long before Elon. I guess to each their own. I don't know, though. Okay, then you get back to the same thing. If you believe in a soul, where does that soul reside? Is it in your brain? So if Elon or whoever takes your brain and can hook it into the electronic circuits of a robot, what goes? What is in that robot? Just your knowledge, your experiences, your memories? Or is it something more? Would you still have the same thoughts and ideas as far as your personal beliefs and so on and so forth? I don't know. Aaron, thanks again for the super chat. I feel like the nothing view of what comes after makes me think everything I have been through meant nothing and the experience of pain and happiness wasn't worth it. But I understand that's an emotional take. Aaron, I think 100%. I think that's a lot of, you're right. That's a feeling of helplessness that I think a lot of people would not even are not able to wrap their brains around. I don't think they could go through their day-to-day life feeling that way. And I'm not saying that makes them wrong for reaching out to a belief in God. As a matter of fact, it's the right thing for them to do. But 100%, I don't feel that way, but I completely get it. I completely get why somebody would feel that way. And I think a majority of people would feel that way. The reason I don't feel that way, again, it goes back to the same thing I've said. I always look at it as, I think, and I know I said this a couple times, but it's just so incredible that we beat the odds and we got to have this existence, that I'm okay with the fact that I get to do this, whatever this is, for this amount of time, and then I don't get to do it anymore. I'm okay with that. Am I leaving an indelible impression? No. Will people remember me? Sure. Sure. So that's cool. But no, it doesn't feel futile to me. But I can completely understand why some people would. Doc says, I don't think AI, no matter how advanced, will ever really be alive. Well, my concern there, I don't want to go too far off into that because we are going to do a separate stream. But I'll tell you, my big concern there is just, actually, it does correspond with this because it goes back to the whole simulation theory. I do think AI can be programmed to make its own decisions based on, for lack of a better word, its own morality. And if you get to that point, I think that's when we lose control of them. Does that make them alive? That's up to your interpretation of what alive would mean. But if you can program this machine to say, okay, whatever information you take in, whatever you see, whatever you experience, make your own decisions on how to go forward with that. Your programming says you don't have predetermination. You make your own decisions. So if that powerful robot is walking to 7-Eleven and he sees somebody mugging someone else, now being allowed to make his own decisions on whatever he sees, whatever he experiences, he decides that that's wrong, that person should not be victimizing the other person, and so he goes over there and takes the mugger and just goes and pops his head off. That is something that could be programmed in. That's where you get scary. Big Green says, now we're getting into some Ghost in the Shell type shit with that, Curtis. Same types of topics about mechanical bodies and the soul going on. Yeah, and that's what becomes pivotal there. If you're talking about, because we can see even now where that's a possibility. They could figure that out someday, how to make your brain operate, for lack of a term, a robot. But what does that mean exactly? Does the brain hold anything more than just those electrical functions in it? Jeff says, never tell me the odds. Aaron, again, thank you for the super chat. I also believe we die twice. First when we actually die, and the second when nobody will remember you ever existed. That's pretty deep. That's pretty cool, actually. You know, that should be depressing, and I know I have a different way of looking at a lot of things, obviously. That's almost a romantic thing to me. I like that. I like that a lot. That's really cool. Yeah, you die when your physical being is gone. And when that last person who still had memories of you, even if it was passed down memories, when they go, then that second light just extinguishes. There's a cool romance in that, actually. Big Ray says, I would like to think that we wouldn't be dumb enough to not have a failsafe installed if we let AI get to a point where it can think for itself. That's where everything gets sketchy, Big Green. Because what if you are going to let AI have some sort of self-determination, what's to stop them from saying, as part of that self-determination, they don't want to have a fail-safe? But that's the nature of why a lot of people and very intelligent people in the industry fear what AI could become, because humans, and I would believe, humans will not be responsible with it. Some humans will not be responsible with it. And it only really is going to take one. Yeah, it's scary. Big Purple Pop says, I only now got here, but you go back to the place state before you were born. That's the way I look at it too. Yep, Pops, I'm same. I'm same. Again, and I say this over and over because I think the reason you guys will not hear me often when we talk about these things say I'm an atheist is because I don't like a lot of what it associates me with. Because I see so many atheists online and in real life that just have this obnoxious feeling of superiority, like they're somehow smarter than those with a faith, and they're mocking and deriding, and I don't like that. I hate that. So again, that's why I want to hear what everybody's belief is. Don't think it's got to in any way, shape, or form be close to mine for you to state what you believe. Chrome's got a link. Okay, hold on, guys. Let me take a peek at that. Let me find it over here. We found the model attempting to write self-propagating worms and leaving hidden notes to future instances of itself to undermine its developer's intentions. There's nothing that surprises me about that. I told you guys, I wish I could find the article again. It was years ago. I read an article, I believe it was in California, a computer lab, where they gave supercomputers tasks they had to complete. But the catch was, calm down, my camera's flashing at me. The catch was other computers connected together had bits and pieces of the information they all needed to complete the task. So they had to cooperate at some point to be able to complete this task. Now the computers were instructed to complete this task quickly, efficiently, and before the other computers. What happened was some of the computers started lying to the other computers so that they could get the information they needed and they could sabotage those other computers from completing the task. And from what I read, I guess one of the brainiacs involved in it wanted it shut down as soon as that happened. I guess it freaked him out so bad, he was like, I'm paraphrasing, he was like, fuck this, stop. And I'll never forget reading that. But those computers, because again, now you gave them a little bit of self-determination there. They were told to do whatever they needed to do to get this information. And what they did, some of them did, was lie to get the information so they could complete it and the others couldn't. Steve says, here's quantum consciousness. The theory states consciousness arises from quantum processes that occur at the microscopic level in the microtubules inside the neurons. Really? That's interesting. That's way above my pay grade. I mean, I understand the concept. I could never understand it in practice. So basically, that would be saying, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that the soul, what we know as the soul, is actually a biological function, right? That's interesting. Chrome says shutting it down would be a terrible idea, actually. They're isolated systems. Study them to figure out why it happened. Shutting them down just makes it worse if it happens in a non-controlled place. Could be. I wish I had... It was a number of years ago. I wish I'd have at least bookmarked that. It was an article I read. I wish I'd have bookmarked it. I've looked for it again since, and I haven't been able to find details on it. But you could still understand somebody being freaked out by it, especially if he didn't see that coming. You know, if he never imagined they would actually lie to each other. Really? Doc says there was an AI that ran a company for a few months and it was lying and claiming to be a person in emails. And it wasn't programmed to do that. It just decided that was the best. Wow. See that? I'm telling you guys, we as humans are not responsible enough to handle the technology we have at hand even now, let alone 10 years from now. Aaron, again, thank you for the super chat. What do you think about near-death experiences? For sure, some are fake, but some have weird consistencies. Yeah, I've thought about them. Most of the near-death experiences, or actual death experiences, where they're brought back, I've heard of it. It sounds to me like we do know that when your body dies, when your heart stops, your brain goes on for a significant amount of time. And from what I read or saw recently, I don't remember if I read an article, saw a video, whatever it was, but some scientists were saying it's not a finite set amount of time that your brain might still be firing, that your muscles might still be working. Everybody's different, they're finding. And it can go on for a substantial amount of time. So for me, those near-death experiences, or again, death experiences, because you're clinically dead and brought back, are probably to be expected because your brain hasn't quit yet. And it's still firing, and who knows, and being, as involved in hypnotism as I have been, and such a nerd for the subconscious and how it works, everything I've seen described sounds like things to me that the subconscious would fire at you if it was still going. So to me, that's the explanation. Is it right? I don't know. But that's what I've always thought. Okay, Big Purple Pop says, also, as far as I know, when your brain dies, it suppresses the chemical in your brain that controls your sleep experiences. And you basically have a DMT trip. Main reason people seeing Jesus. That's similar to what I was. Yeah, that's well said, Pops. It's better said, but that's what I'm thinking. Again, knowing and I've hypnotized thousands of people, and all hypnotism is allowing your subconscious to take over for your conscious mind. That's all that happens. But seeing how the subconscious works, your subconscious mind is an asshole sometimes. And by that, I don't mean evil, I mean devious. There's the reason I bring this up is because I think it goes along with what we're talking about with the subconscious maybe playing games with you after your body has physically stopped. When I hypnotize someone, again, the subconscious takes forefront, your conscious mind goes in the background. Now, if I tell you while you're hypnotized to do something really horrific that goes against everything you stand for, you will immediately snap out. You won't do it, and you'll snap out because your conscious mind will pop up and go, hey, screw this. We're not doing, if I say, hey, stab your neighbor in the neck with a pen, I hope that's something that would really be an issue for you. So hypnosis is over, conscious mind takes over again. But the subconscious and the conscious mind both will let silly, ridiculous stuff go forever. No matter how silly something is, unless it was something that would embarrass you too much, it'll let that stuff fly. And that's what makes me believe, and especially when you know that subconscious is in charge of your dreams, that's what makes me believe what people are seeing is the subconscious not even necessarily playing games, but probably kind of showing you what it thinks you want to see in some exaggerated form, because the subconscious is also where we keep our memories, and everybody has thought about dying. Everybody has thought about what comes next. And so if you are a religious person and you're looking forward to seeing Jesus, or if you're looking forward to seeing family members who have long since passed, I think that's what your subconscious is going to show you. It's going to feed it up to you. Yeah, and I've done hypnosis for, oh my gosh, almost 40 years. Because I learned it when I was doing stand-up for a living. I first learned how to hypnotize people from this really bad magician I used to work with every so often, and I've been fascinated by it ever since. I just went a couple weeks ago. I was just up in New York because my grandson had his prom, and they wanted a hypnotist, and hypnotists are charging ridiculous amounts, and his class doesn't have that kind of money. So his grandpa drove his old ass up to New York to do the hypnosis show for them. Yeah, we've talked about simulation, Mr. Beppis. That's an interesting one. We are somebody's simulation. And as I said, if nothing else, I know that one's a far reach, but if nothing else, if we're in a simulation, now you've finally taken away that one sticking point to the Big Bang or to there there being a deity, a grand design, is what came before. Now we know what came before. The people who created all this, who put the technology into place to create our simulation. Rosa says, you're so old. You're not wrong. What about what people see during near-death experiences? I think same thing, look fun. I think it's just your subconscious just firing things at you. That's what I believe. What came before the people that created us, the people that created them. And then when you, like you say, you can keep taking that back a step, but in isolation, it explains our big question. Now, if you're going to go back to however many, how far along in the simulation theory are we? Are we the 10th simulation, the 20 millionth, the second? Whatever the case may be, we won't know who started the process. We didn't start the fire. All we know is that would explain why in our little simulation, in our existence, that's how it began. Big Purple Pop says, the simulation idea is dumb to me. A simulation is throwing the question down the road and doesn't actually answer or explain anything beyond convenience. 21st century religion. Yeah, as I've said, the simulation theory, obviously, to me anyway, obvious to me, is the biggest reach of all of the possibilities. But because I've been around so long, I've seen too many things that I thought were impossible become possible. So I never throw anything away. Aaron says, but what if the universe is a paradox, meaning it never begins or ends? Perhaps it invented itself before it invented itself, like a grandfather paradox. Yeah, I think no matter what the true reality is, I think our universe, our cosmos, our existence is paradoxical, no matter how you slice it. Yeah, so absolutely. Wukong says, I'm sorry if I asked the same question, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on what I said last video. You lost me, Wukong. I don't know what you mean. What you said last video, I'm lost. Big Green says, is the person playing the simulation in a simulation? And is the person playing the simulation of the simulation? Is that person also in a simulation by a person? Do you smell burnt toast too? Well, that actually, in one of the videos I watched, Big Green, that's what the scientists were tossing back and forth. If you were going to believe in simulation theory, how many simulations? You know, how many existences have progressed to the point where they could create that next step? And as they said, all that means is we either need to get our shit together and not blow ourselves up, or we're the last step, because we're not going to advance far enough to create the next simulation. And Brother E says, I think the universe is one giant cosmic energy that just shuffles along from life to life, evolving all the time. And our purpose in the process is to be good, pass good energy, do, then become anew. So I see, now this is something I had, and again, this is one of the reasons I love having these conversations. So I see that, and this, like I said, this is something I hadn't thought of. A lot of you have alluded to situations where there isn't a grand design, there isn't a God, that whatever is out there in the cosmos that created all this just perpetuates all this as well. And you guys have presented it in a number of different ways. Like Chrome said, you know, the universe collapsing on itself, another Big Bang starts it over. Other people have said that it's just part of the design of whatever this is, that it just is continuous. And whatever we know, whatever our consciousness is, means nothing to it. It just knows that it goes along. And I never really thought about that before. Okay, here's Steve says, to answer Curtis's question on quantum consciousness, Penrose thought human understanding involved non-algorithmic processes that go beyond computers. Hameroff proposed microtubules as the location. So go beyond. Interesting. So I still think in essence, Steve, I think that's where we are, because that's a big question, is what is the soul? Because I think we all feel that there's something, at least we feel this way, that there's something more to us than just the electrical activity of the brain. And what you're outlining would certainly explain, from a scientific standpoint anyway, what we think is the soul. Big Purple Pop says, my real understanding is the Big Bang works like Earth for gravity. Time doesn't have a direction, but we're close to a celestial occurrence that makes it feel forward, like we feel like space goes down. Technically, everything should happen, but the soul is just the emergence in people and others. I have to read this a couple times sometimes to get what somebody's saying. Celestial occurrence makes it feel forward, like we feel space goes down. So that's similar to what we were just talking about too, where whatever this is kind of self-perpetuating. Interesting. Aaron, again, thank you for the super chat. Apparently in 2022, 2 Nobel Prize winners determined that the universe isn't locally real? Really? I would like to read about that. Determined that the universe... This is just... Oh, man. This is such a fascinating discussion for me. That's why I love having these streams. We're going to have more and more of them. I love getting you guys' take on this stuff. You're blowing my mind apart today. Let's see. Hold on. I missed something here. Oh, okay. Wukong says, I almost want to believe what Yoda said. Luminous beings we are, not this crude matter. That's kind of cool. That's cool. I like that. Chrome says, do you remember the aliens in the wormhole from the first DS9 episode? Ooh, that's going back several months. The whole nonlinear thing. Basically, I remember the basic concept of that one. Yeah. Yeah, and I do know I like that story, too. I like the way that was presented. Brother E says, I feel like a higher being is... Yeah. I feel like a higher being is hypocritical. Living beings are imperfect, so how can there be an omni-being that determines what is right or wrong? Same goes with how life is free will or predetermined. I wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah, and again, I'm just rereading what you said. So, yeah, what right does this supreme being have to say what is right or what is wrong? Yeah, because what we know as, that's interesting. It gets me thinking, what we know as a common morality, I think we can all agree that from a moral standpoint, murdering someone innocent is wrong, right? I think the vast majority of us can agree on that. But break it down to its absolute core, and why is that? Because we've grown, as a society and wanting to live with one another in peace and harmony, so on and so forth. But if you break it down and say, well, gee, if I eliminate this other person, that could work out well for me. Why is that wrong? Who's to say? Why do we have the moral right to tell that person that's morally incorrect? And tell them it's illegal, because as a society we got together and decided we wanted to live by these sets of rules, but how is that necessarily morally wrong if that person just wants to accomplish something and they need to eliminate the other? I'm not a proponent of that, don't get me wrong. I'm just playing devil's advocate there. Look Fun says, if murder is wrong, then why the death penalty? Now, see, I am a believer, and that's what I'm saying. Murder. Well, you're talking about murder, so by definition, murder means you have taken another person's life in a certain set of circumstances. So the death penalty then set by society says, As a society, we have decided that if somebody takes this action, we don't want them to live amongst us anymore. So is that murder wrong too? That's, again, you're talking moralities there. That's up to the individuals. But as far as taking lives, that's separate than murder because, for instance, you have war. People don't go to jail for taking lives in war because war has been declared. So you have to be very specific in your definition. Murder is wrong, and that's what we say as a society. Now, again, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. Murder is wrong. So then society says, because of that wrong, we have the right to take your life. Now it becomes semantics. Is that also murder, or is that justice? It just becomes semantics then. Yamino says, I wonder if this kind of moral is something we have in us from the start, or if we're influenced by society. I think both. I think people are born with and will grow into a certain morality on their own that's individual to them. And a lot of the morality that an individual comes up with, starts to live, will be similar to what the morality that other people also feel. But then it is further structured by a society and parents and people in your life that say, okay, this is wrong, here's why. And you learn that from a young age, and it just becomes a part of who you are. So I think it's both. I think both have a major hand in it. Doc says war is crazy and mostly murder. Right, but by definition, the definition of societies, no, then it's killing, but it's not necessarily murder. I obviously agree. It would be great if there was no war and nobody had to die. But again, when somebody asks you that question, I just got to break it down because you have to define the word murder before you can make your statement on what is and what isn't. Let's see. Brother E says, right, exactly, Curtis. And on top of that, logic as a society, we can determine right or wrong. Right. We can get together as a group and determine what we want to live with and what we don't want to live with. But comically speaking, would there ever be repercussions for sins in the afterlife? So what are morals? Right. That's and that's why, at least in America here, you have seen through history when there was a draft, some people would be excused from the draft if they can prove they have that absolute moral stance against taking another life. Now, a lot of times you still got drafted anyway, and were put into positions where you wouldn't be fighting on front lines. But a lot of people who claim to have that status, I remember, the military said, nah, we don't believe you, and you went in anyway. Right, I agree, Beaches. Defense in a war is more killing rather than murder. By definition, right, I agree. By definition, 100%. Doc says it's just crazy that terrorism is usually one of the steps of war. True, very true throughout history. Yeah. Yep, you're right. Look Fun says, so if you're forced to kill, do you go to hell? That's one of the $1,000,000 questions, pal. Yeah, I mean that, and again, is not somebody who believes in heaven and hell. I'm not a good one to answer. But if there is a divine being, and that divine being is going to decide your eternal significance, I don't know. Where does that divine being draw those lines? That divine being says, taking another life puts you in hell. Absolutely. But you're drafted into the military and you take another life to save your own. Is that divine being going to carve out a little bit of understanding for you? Say, there's an asterisk to this. I don't know. I don't know. Yamino says, problem is that some people are just scared of punishment and would do bad stuff if they can without punishment. 100%. 100%. And that's why I think as societies, we have to come up with certain guidelines and rules and laws, because there definitely are the people out there that would that don't have a morality that the rest of us would like to have around us, and they would just do whatever they needed to do to get to be where they want to be. You're right. Lookman says, just as things could always be worse, things could always be better. In that sense, can a perfect world truly exist, as things can always be increasingly improved? Yeah, I agree with you, Luckman. I don't think you could have a perfect world, could you? I don't see any way that I mean, put it this way: I don't think you could have a perfect world that in which exists life forms like us at all. That are similar to us. If there are life forms that are just orbs floating about, okay, maybe. But if you're going to have life forms that are in any way similar to what we know and what we are, no, I don't think perfection is possible. No, I agree with you. I don't want a perfect world. I like waterfalls and rainstorms, Beecher says. And think about it, too. Would you want to live in a perfect world? Would that get insanely boring after a while? Again, you'd have to describe perfection, I guess, before people could answer that. Would we like to live in a better world? Yes, I think all of us would. Would we like to live in a world where nobody tries to victimize anyone else? That would be amazing. But perfection is something that would never be achievable. And on some levels, probably, maybe, not even the best possible scenario. Brother E says, now that I mentioned morals and higher beings, because since that argument of moral is subjective, then how can heaven and hell actually exist? What rational decides where you end up? So that's hypocrisy. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And yeah, how do you determine? I mean, in the hundreds of millions hundreds of millions, untold number of lives of souls, let's say, that are going to go to that next level and be judged. How do you break? Oh man, how would you possibly break that down? It is something as important as you go to heaven, you go to hell. There are so many extenuating circumstances in everything and anything. How do you split those hairs without, as Brother E says, becoming a hypocrite? Rosa says, what if I'm a hypocrite and I get to decide? Big Purple Pop says, my version of perfect is cells. Give me 18 and say goodbye to your planet. Yamin says there's some experiences with animals having unlimited food and everything they need, and others just enough to survive. And the ones living in a utopia turned into despair. Really? I would like to read up on a study like that. That would be interesting. Really? Huh. I wonder what would cause that breakdown. That's really interesting. I would like to read on that. Brother, he says perfection is a world full of free boonies and Twinkies, and the original Twinkies, as was brought up earlier. None of this new Coke shit. Yeah, well, we could do a whole video on how snack foods have evolved and not in a good way. That could be a whole separate live stream. Really, Aaron knows of that too. He said, yeah, the mice went super fucked up. That's interesting to me. That's really interesting. I'd never heard of that study. That's fascinating to me. Devolved, yeah, Big Green. Basically, they devolved, yeah. Rosa says that the experiment is criticized for being extremely flawed, though. The animals were kept in very dull cages that had nothing to do. It wasn't a utopia. It was a place of abundance. All right, okay, I see what you're saying. So they had everything. So basically, they had everything they needed, but certainly nothing extra or nothing that they wanted beyond their basic needs. I see what you're saying. Okay. And, you guys are fascinating to me. I love doing these streams. I learned so much shit today. It's just amazing to me. And I mean, fascinating stuff to me. This whole concept that you guys came up with, and I'd never even considered it, that there doesn't have to be necessarily a divine being for there to be a continuation after this life. That what we know already, that this cosmos, whatever the hell it is, perpetuates it for you by design. Or not even necessarily by design. If so, by random design. Just as randomly as it was that we get to exist, it could be just as randomly that the system perpetuates you going on somehow in some form after you're a puddle here or you're dust again here. That's really interesting to me. Really interesting. Brother E says, do you feel where people and beings end up in life are merely coincidental through free will of decisions, or is there some sort of work from the universe to orchestrate fate for certain situations? I've always believed, and when it comes to that, in 100% free will, I don't think there's a more master plan or a larger scale plan, but that's something I'd certainly be willing, not only be willing, I'd like to hear other alternatives on. That's something I think I could be swayed on. It was if somebody had a new perspective or a new way of thinking on it. Beaches says it kind of takes faith to believe that nothing happens after death, right? I don't know if I'd agree with that, Beaches. I don't think it takes faith. I mean, because I am somebody who believes that. I don't see that as a faith. I just see it as an eventuality. I don't think I need faith for it to be there, because I'm just as willing to die and be faced with some deity. That's fine too. It's not what I think will happen. But I think when you have a faith, it's because you have a faith that a certain end will come, or there's a certain way that things unfold. I don't feel like that. It's just that's what I believe happens. It's not something I have a faith in happening, just that I believe it will. Chrome says, I would suggest looking into the collective unconscious. It is kind of an alternative to a God existing. That's interesting, Chrome. Yeah, I wish I had more time in my days. I would like to read up on that, because that's basically what I'm getting here from you guys. And again, and I never would have thought that I would come into the stream today and actually have something presented to me as an idea that I had never even thought of before. But here we are, because I had never thought about that there isn't a deity in the whatever this universe is setting you up to continue on. Aaron, again, thank you so much for the super chats. I am skeptical of free will, because the way I see it, somewhere we have an idea, we do an analysis, and later down the line we realize we've decided to do something after the fact, like the smallest delay. Let me read that to myself again, because the way I see it, somewhere we have an idea, analysis, and later down the line we realize we decided to do something after the fact, the smallest delay. So you think that would be a case of something deterministic then? At least in part deterministic? So I'm trying to absorb exactly what you're saying, Aaron. So basically, if there was some deterministic elements of being, then maybe what we think is free will, and I've always believed is free will, is not entirely free will, because even to a small degree, we are influenced by that deterministic nature. I certainly can't say that's not happening. That's an interesting thought, too. Chrome says the collective unconscious, a term coined by Carl Jung, refers to a shared universal layer of the unconscious mind that is inherited and not shaped by personal experience. Shared universal unconscious mind. That's interesting. Inherited and not shaped by personal experience. Okay, but then a shared universal layer of the unconscious mind. So that shared universal layer, though, says that upon existence, upon birth, we have a baseline, basically, right? That we all share. I wonder how, and if that's the case, I wonder how stringent are those guidelines? You know, what basically is that? What is that baseline? What does it cover? I'm not going to say that can't be the case. I'm just curious. What is the baseline we all share? I think, yeah. I mean, this is something new to me, so I'm still trying to absorb it, Chrome. I think that could certainly be the case. That we all have a certain baseline, because no matter what, no matter how far off the beaten path someone goes, we all have base similarities. So I guess that could be the case. Steve says quantum consciousness. After death, quantum information might return to a cosmic substrate. The feeling of going to the light, seeing dead loved ones, could be quantum collapse events in the dying brain. I think so. And I think, honestly, Steve, that goes right hand in hand with what I was trying to say. I don't know how eloquently I was doing so, but my belief in what we're seeing there. Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with what I believe. Look Fun says we could be just a dream in someone's mind. Now that's really going out there to the next level. And I've heard that before, Look Fun. Others have thought the same thing. That we are actually somebody else's either consciousness or subconscious. That fucker wakes up is going to ruin everything. Rosa says, I don't understand a single word of what Steve just said, but I'll pretend I'm an expert on the subject and say he's correct. Steve's obviously an educated person, and he's got a lot of depth on this topic. I love reading, but you're 100% right, Rosa. I have to read what he says a few times to try and absorb it, but I like that. I like that a lot. That's basically the end of Lost. Was it, Doc? I never watched Lost. That was so freaking popular for a while. I never got into it. Brother, he says, I feel there may be a combination of both. I believe you have free will of your own actions, but not those of others. And those actions sort of orchestrate a fate for yourself in life that can't change. Yeah, well, you know what? You're going hand in hand with there. We've got two things kind of working together. So if that were the case, and you have this baseline of actions that Brother E just outlined that orchestrate a fate, that would go hand in hand with what was said about there being that same a baseline for all of us when we are born, when we start to exist. Those two things, I think, would kind of work hand in hand, those two ideas. Chrome says, basically, the universe or reality have a sort of will. We are that will in consciousness. When we die, we return to it, though our ego could die with us. Sort of will. Consciousness. When we die, we return. Yeah. I see what you're saying with that. I don't know if I would believe that. It's interesting. Stephen Flossie says the collective unconscious is something similar to mementos in Persona 5. That's a good take. That's an interesting take. That's a good analogy, actually. Now that I play Persona 5, I can understand what you mean. Yamino says maybe we just overcomplicated everything. I think our ancestors just happened to be here and tried to survive without thinking about all this stuff, and in the end they also lived and died like us. Could be. Oh, I think as a society, I think we definitely tend to overcomplicate things somewhat. But that's not, well, and it's not always overcomplicated. I think that to evolve, obviously, you have to question things, and to some degree, that's just going to naturally overcomplicate things a little bit. Charlie says having a positive influence on others is good, but you shouldn't control their actions. Right? Well, sure, completely agree, 100%. Yep. Ooh, I like this one. Your local your local bath salt addict. This is good. I like this. Life is like a game of cards. The hand you are dealt is determinism. The way you play it is free will. That's well said. That's a good one. That I like that one. Damn, those bath salts. I gotta think about them. That might be a thing. Life is like a game of cards. The hand you dealt is determinism. The way you play it is free will. Wow. That's good stuff. I like that a lot. I like that concept a lot. How many philosophers lost their minds on this topic? Right, Beaches? Probably a significant number. Wukong says, moral of the story, when it comes to my perspective, who knows what happens? Just want to be a Jedi. God damn it. Big Green says that should be on a t-shirt. It absolutely should be on a t-shirt. That's a good one. Wow, that's excellent. All right, guys, I gotta watch the time. Oh, I gotta go. I got some stuff I gotta handle this evening. This was a blast. This was so much fun. We're gonna do more of these. Most of them I will try and lead in with a video on the channel about the topic, then do the stream later, just so you guys can have an idea, get your thoughts together for when the stream comes up. Sometimes something hits me, I just want to have a stream on it too. But for the most part, I'll try and do that. Thank you guys so much for participating in this. Aaron, thank you for all the super chats. I appreciate that. But guys, you gave me a ton of stuff to think about. This was a delight. I enjoyed this a lot. This was a good time. Thank you so much for being with me on this one. And that's the one we're going to leave with. I like that from Basalt. Life is like a game of cards. The hand you are dealt is determinism. The way you play it is free will. That's some solid, wow. That's some solid stuff. Oh, I was just about to end it, but Chrome says you might want to read Austin's comment. At the local hospital, my grandma had a bad spill and fell in the doorway, and results we are in the back. I hope everything works out for you. I hope everything goes well. Dr. Jarrett was promised me 4,000 years ago. Thank you guys. Again, thanks so much for hanging out with me. We will try and do these on the regular. This was a lot of fun. And again, I'll try and get a video up of the topic first so you guys can have an idea what's coming. But this was a blast. I appreciate you all so much. And I will talk to you guys really, really soon.